I've been telling you for about a year now that we can expect over the 18 to 24 following months, now the sort of following 6 to 12 months, for ISIS to lose major territory in the Middle East, as well as many of their key people, making the more important question, how do you stop the impact of their radicalization ideology across the West? This is happening. ISIS has lost major territory in Syria and in Iraq. We now have early initial reports from Syrian state television that say that the leader of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, was killed in an airstrike in Raqqa, Syria on Saturday night. And if you've been following the sort of movement of ISIS, Raqqa has been a sort of nerve center for ISIS, a headquarters of sorts for their activities, which also includes sex trafficking, as well as attacks in Syria, Iraq, elsewhere. ISIS controls all aspects of life in Raqqa. They've taken over the government, they control the schools, they've set up courts and police to enforce Sharia law. Some of their worst displays have taken place there, like public executions, public displays of bodies, and false claims of al-Baghdadi's death have been reported before, Pat. So we'll have to see what ultimately comes of this. There are skeptical independent experts, but at the same time, we're seeing more and more unified reporting about this killing. So this is important in terms of destabilizing ISIS organizationally in the first place. But we have to remember that if an individual in France is radicalized by the ideology of ISIS, the killing of this particular person, if true, is not going to change the ability of that individual in France to become radicalized.
Yeah, but it might take some time for our own U.S. government to confirm the fact that Baghdadi was killed, if he in fact was. But that's pretty standard. Mohammed Emwazi, who is colloquially known as Jihadi John, who was featured in those videos of beheadings of James Foley and others, he was killed in an airstrike in November of 2015, but the U.S. government didn't confirm that until the following month.
That long it took?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we may have some time to wait. But the sort of key aspect here is that defeating ISIS isn't going to happen through just bombing their physical territory in the Middle East and killing leaders. And this is why it's so complex, because ISIS and jihadism and those who sympathize exist globally throughout the world, throughout the Muslim world. And that can include majority Muslim countries. It can include particular communities, enclaves in Western countries as well. And as we see each time we have one of these attacks in the UK, France, Belgium, the US, jihadists of this flavor are decentralized and worldwide are fulfilling what they see as their mission, whether they have direct connections to institutions or individuals in Syria and Iraq led by al-Baghdadi or not. The real objective has to be fighting radical Islamist ideology. And many people refer to these suicide attacks that we've been seeing as mindless acts or mindless killings. But they aren't really mindless. They're intentional, planned acts that are carried out with the purpose of killing those who are going against whatever the believed doctrine is of these individuals. And this is often by people who have been proven to be educated, and I guess you could say otherwise mentally sound. The whole mental illness thing is complex because on the one hand, how mentally sound can you be if you're willing to kill yourself and others on the basis that God likes it and you'll end up in heaven with 72 virgins? But the truth is that saying all of these perpetrators are merely insane is really an insult to people who deal with mental illness. Overwhelmingly, people who are, quote, mentally ill are not violent, period. So yes, there may be mental illness involved in some cases, but there is always more than that. And it's this radicalization, it's this reading or false reading or accurate but perverted reading, call it what you want, plausible reading of the scripture that they believe calls for this type of violence. So the problem isn't sort of fundamentalism. It's kind of a classic example. If you think of the religion Jainism. Jainists are vegetarians whose entire lives revolve around not harming other living things. Extremism in a Jain is basically people staring at the ground when they walk so they don't step on bugs or kill bacteria, or drinking water through cheesecloth so you don't accidentally drink up or eat a bug, right? That's extremism in Jainism. Extremism per se doesn't directly lead to what we're seeing through these readings of the Hadith and the Quran. So that's where the focus, I think, needs to be.
No, it really is two parts. One part of that, of course, is if it's a fundamentalist approach, and then the other part is the ideology itself.
Yes.
And perhaps the problem is more severe when it comes to Islam because there hasn't been that enlightenment that Christianity has had. And of course, the key prophet in Christianity was seen as this peaceful hippie type guy, where you can't really say the same thing when it comes to Islam.
Yes, although there's been no shortage of people doing violence under Christianity as well. In the U.S., as we talk about, worldwide, most terror is committed by Muslims. In the United States, by and large, it is committed by white Christians, even if you call them so-called casual Christians. So killing radicals in Raqqa is not going to solve the problem. We have to commend and empower those within the Muslim community whose mission it is to moderate and modernize the religion, as well as ex-Muslims whose mission it is to support and protect other ex-Muslims. And the left has this horrible habit of demonizing inside reformers. I don't have to mention their names. You probably know who some of them are, because they see jihad as a political problem, not as a religious one. And they see attempts to reform and foster defection as a sort of attack on the Muslim community. And you really have to separate the two. So encourage Muslim communities to be more willing to communicate with law enforcement, encourage moderate interpretations of the Quran and the Hadiths. But we're never going to get anywhere unless we name the particular flavor of Islamist ideology that needs to be targeted. That's not Islamophobia. It is actually distinguishing radicals from reasonable Muslims. And I think that saying extremist Islam doesn't exist is a real problem. I think saying moderate Islam doesn't exist is also a problem, because whatever you can point to in the scriptures, you see it in Christianity. There is huge violence in the Bible, but you have moderate Christians, just as you have radical Christians who are willing to commit terror under that umbrella. So we'll see if this is ultimately confirmed. Big news if it is, but not a panacea, no doubt about it.